I did my research, I saw the best people, I took the newest drugs. 3 years later, I'm in a tilt recline wheelchair. I take mitoxantrone, then I take tizabri, I continue to decline, then I've switched to Celcept. And that's what I'm asking myself, am I really doing all that I can? And when I relive that moment, I still cry, because that was when the current understanding of secondary progressive MS is incomplete, and like how much recovery might be possible.
Dr. Terry Wahls, welcome to the MS Mindset.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for giving up some of your time. Appreciate you are very busy and you've got lots going on in the world of MS. But yeah, how have things been going recently? How's life in the world of MS?
Well, really great. This morning I jogged on my treadmill, and so I've made so much progress personally. Yeah. And then in the research world, I've gone from being sort of crazy and dangerous to now being celebrated as one of the very important MS researchers.
Which is amazing, and I think I speak on behalf of the whole MS community. How grateful we are for the work that you've been doing. It's fantastic. For those that perhaps don't know your story, do you want to perhaps give a little bit of background in terms of how this all happened?
Sure. So I'm an internal medicine physician. I was in practice in 2000. I developed weakness in my left leg. I started stumbling. I got a workup. We saw a lesion in my head, one in my spinal cord. And I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. I did my research. I saw the best people. I took the newest drugs. 3 years later, I'm in a tilt recline wheelchair. I take mitoxantrone, then I take tizabri. I continue to decline. Then I've switched to Celcept. And that's what I'm asking myself, am I really doing all that I can? And I go back to reading the basic science. I decide that mitochondria are the drivers of disability, and I start creating a supplement cocktail for my mitochondria. The speed of my decline slows. I'm very, very grateful. I discover instead of using electrical stimulation of muscles, I asked my physical therapist if we can add that to my rehab, and we do. Then I had this really big aha, Liam, and now I'm sort of embarrassed about how long it took me to have this. What if I redesigned my paleo diet that I've been following already for 5 years based on this long list of supplements? And so I did more research to figure out where those things are in the food supply, and I have this new way of eating, which I start December 26, 2007. Now, for your listeners, I want you to know at that point, I'm so weak I cannot sit up in a regular chair like I am now. I'm in a zero gravity chair with my knees higher than my nose. That's how I staff clinic with the residents. That's how I take my meals at home. I'm too weak. I can't go out to the movies. I can't go to the restaurants. Life is difficult. And my trigeminal neuralgia, which I've had for 27 years and has been getting relentlessly worse, I'm very fearful that it's going to turn permanently on, so that every sensory input is transmuted to this intense electrical pain. I'm beginning to have some brain fog. So it's clear to me, if I look back at the 27 years of worsening trigeminal neuralgia, 7 years of relentlessly worsening MS, that I'm headed towards becoming bedridden by my illness, possibly demented by my illness, and probably dying with intractable pain. That's 2007. A month into 2008, I realized that my energy's improved, my mental clarity's improved, and my physical therapist says, Terry, you are stronger. I'm advancing your exercises, and I can start doing my little mat exercises twice a day, 15 minutes twice a day, then 20 minutes, then 30 minutes. And then I start walking with 2 walking sticks, stunning my colleagues. And then I'm walking with 1 walking stick, and then no walking sticks. And then on Mother's Day, which is, not even 6 months into this new program I'm doing, I decided I want to try riding my bike, and which I've not done in 6 years. We have an emergency family meeting. My wife, Jackie, tells my 16-year-old boy, Zach, who's 6'5", Zach, you run alongside on the left. She tells my daughter, who's 13, you run alongside on the right, and she'll follow. And we get into position. She gives the all clear. I get on my bike, and I bike around the block. And that big 16-year-old boy, he's crying. The 13-year-old girl, she's crying. Jackie's crying. And when I relive that moment, I still cry, because that was when, the current understanding of secondary progressive MS is incomplete, and like how much recovery might be possible. And so I ride a little more every day. And then in October, Jackie says, honey, I've signed us up for the Courage Ride. It's 18.5 miles. However far you go will be a triumph. And at that point, the farthest I'd gone was 8 miles. But I crossed that finish line. And, we're all crying again. My kids are crying, Jackie's crying, I'm crying. And this fundamentally changes how I think about disease and health. It will change the way I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of my research. And I've made it my mission to teach other clinicians how to do what I do, and to teach the world. And I want all of your listeners to know, if I can come back from such profound disability to where I could jog 20 minutes on my treadmill this morning, there's hope for you. Despite what your doctors tell you, there is hope for you.
Exactly. It's such an inspiring story. I think particularly because, as you've already articulated, the severity of the disability had already taken its grip on you, and you were, so limited. To be able to go from that to completing these incredible feats of big races, or even just getting on the bike again.
Just getting on the bike, like, oh my God.
Getting that freedom back. It must have been, I can see why it's still a very emotional moment to relive. Yeah, I completely get why, because it's just an incredible turnaround, and something that's come from, not from a doctor's office telling you to take this tablet or this drug, more about going back to basics and studying the things that you're consuming, putting into your body. You mentioned there that, was there a link there then initially from the vitamins you were taking, supplements you were taking? You thought, okay, there might have been an effect here. What if I? What was that moment like?
The supplements, when I, in 2004, when I got in the wheelchair, life's, pretty grim. But I'm a doc, like, okay, am I really doing everything that I can? I'm still mentally clear. I should be reading the basic science. And I started experimenting. And 6 months into this land, I'm taking, some B vitamins, coenzyme Q, and I'm like, I'm wasting my money. So I quit them all. And I couldn't get out of bed. 3 days later, my wife comes in and says, honey, why'd you take these again? So I took them. And the next morning, I was like, I can get up and go to work. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. So 2 weeks later, I stop everything again, and I wait 3 days, and I'm getting worse every day. And on the third day, I take them again, and the next morning I can get up and go to work. And I think, okay, I'm figuring stuff out that my docs don't know. And so now I am super excited about reading the basic science. I am super excited. And by now, I'm on the institutional review board, which means I'm part of the committee that reviews clinical research. And so I tell that group, give me everything related to the brain. All your neurology, all your psychiatry studies, I want to read them and review them. And I'm getting better and more comfortable at reading the clinical trials, the basic science, and I'm getting way more comfortable at experimenting on myself. Yeah. So I'm doing all sorts of interesting things. So when I saw that study, and I reviewed that study using electrical stimulation of muscles, and people who are paralyzed, who are never going to walk, I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And convinced my physical therapist to let me have a test session, which, by the way, hurt like hell. But when it was over, I felt really, really great. It was clearly doing something to my mood. And my physical therapist said, it's probably the endorphin release. And so we added it, and said I could take as much current as I could tolerate pain-wise. And it always hurt a lot, but I always felt really, really good afterwards in terms of my mood. And so that just got me very excited about what might be possible.
Yeah. I guess there's no greater incentive than you're actually feeling the effects of the things you're doing. I guess with a lot of clinical trials, it's a case of, test, study, look at the data, test, study, and repeat, whereas actually you're feeling the benefit immediately.
And now I continue to read the research about electrical stimulation of muscles. And we know a lot more now than we knew in 2007 when I first started doing this. We know that it causes a release of something called myokines in the muscles that helps the muscles grow bigger, stronger, more muscle mass. Very helpful. It also releases neurotransmitters in the brain, and it releases nerve growth factors in the brain, and a lot of endorphins. So, people report cognitive improvement in mood, and I still do e-stim about an hour a day because I really appreciate what it does to my mood.
Yeah.
It is. I dial it right up. It's pretty uncomfortable for that hour.
Yeah. No pain, no gain, literally.
Yeah. I'm like, oh my God. But I feel so good afterwards. Like, okay, I'm very happy to do it.
Now, are these things perhaps that you feel more benefit from because of how your MS had progressed? Or do you think these are things that anybody who has, like I have weakness in my legs, I get like an electric sort of shock sensation in my leg roughly every 15 seconds all day, every day. But I'm obviously able to, on a good day, walk for long distances, bad days, perhaps not so much. But what would the benefit that I would see perhaps in doing that?
So I'm going to put this in the context of our athletes. The athletes began using electrical stimulation of muscles probably 30 years ago. And these were strength athletes. So wrestlers, sprinters, sprint runners, sprint swimmers, people who need a lot of muscle strength.
Yeah.
Because this gives them a tremendous athletic advantage. Bodybuilders then started using it. Then athletes who had injuries and they're trying to recover from their injury more quickly, or to prevent muscle atrophy if they're in a cast and have to be immobilized. So the athletes started using it. Then we started giving it to stroke patients to recover from stroke more quickly. And then the spinal cord injury folks started using it to reduce the harm of inactivity to their muscles, to their bones, to their blood sugar regulation, to their blood cholesterol regulation. And that was the study that I saw, like, okay, wait a minute, maybe that might help me. And then I started studying it in others with MS. So now we have some other scientists like me who study it in people who are severely disabled, can't move a whole lot. It really helps reduce the harm of inactivity.
Yeah.
And it slowly strengthens their muscles. So, in fact, they have more power in those muscle groups.
Yeah.
So we'll take you, Liam. So I'm hearing a guy who still fairly mobile, has some limitations. If you're having spasm issues, electrical stimulation of muscles reduces the spasms. Because part of the spasms is in response to developing muscle weakness. So if you were my patient, I would say, let's do that because I think it'll reduce your spasms. And then because I really am a big believer in strong muscles for everybody, because muscles are a endocrine organ that help us regulate our blood sugar, our blood cholesterol, and our general level of inflammation. So I want everyone to have, a good amount of muscle on them. So in fact, I'd be telling you, you know what, Liam, if you're willing to do it, let's have you strength train and superpower the strength training by doing electrical stimulation as you strength train.
Wow.
And so when you have the current going, you do the volitional contraction of the muscle, and then during the no current, you relax the muscle, and then the current comes back and you do the volitional contraction. And I tell you, you dial it up to the level of discomfort that you feel like. And so some people want just a little discomfort, and some of us are overachievers. We're gonna, we're gonna dial it all the way up. And our friends will say, like, "Oh my God, I see tears in your eyes." Like, yep, it hurts so good.
Yeah, that's so good. I like that. Yeah, and I imagine as well, the more you do it, the more strength your muscles sort of build. Therefore, the more you can perhaps tolerate.
And the more you can tolerate, the longer you do the electrical current, the more you can tolerate it. And so I've done this for years, so I can tolerate the current that is at the maximum of the FDA allowable current that you can have.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to get to that. And it takes a while, probably your brain is able to reinterpret those signals so they aren't as painful. If I hooked you up to the level of current that I take now, you would never forgive me. It would be really
torturous, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it would be really, really bad. Now, the other thing I want people to know is when you're strength training, whether you're a bodybuilding athlete or you're Liam or Dr. Wahls, what we're doing is we're damaging our muscle.
Yeah.
And the immune cells then come in and say, okay, we're going to clean up that damage, and then we're going to call in the building blocks and make a stronger muscle cell. Yeah. So you have to have enough recovery time after that damage before you damage them again.
Yeah.
So that would mean the bodybuilders would train, allow at least 36, 48 hours between strength training sessions.
Yeah.
So you might do your arms today, and then maybe I do my butt tomorrow, and then maybe my core the next day, and then I come back to my arms.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing my electrical current, I'm migrating body parts. I don't zap the same part every day.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Ironically, I had been doing quite a lot of strength training at the gym prior to my diagnosis. I used to be quite a sort of skinny, slight build, and then I built to quite a sort of, I would say, a reasonable sort of look. I looked like I went to the gym, I think would be the best way to put it. I was never a massive bodybuilder, but yeah, I got very used to, Monday might be chest day, Thursday would be arms and back, or whatever it might be, and understanding that I'm aching and hurting because I have done damage to my muscles and they need to repair. And that's why I would then look to things like, that's why a lot of bodybuilders will have things like protein shakes afterwards, because those protein help repair the muscles faster. And that goes back to your saying about diet, that actually the food we consume is so important.
Absolutely. The food we eat becomes the body and brain I have tomorrow. So if I want a good body and brain, I got to have good food. If I want a junk body and brain, I eat junk food.
Yeah, you are what you eat.
You are what you eat.
Yeah, fantastic. No, it makes a lot of sense. And that's what I think is so, I guess, so easy to understand or approachable about discussing things like this, is because it's not necessarily tons of science or complicated theories thrown at you. It is basics. It is looking at what you eat and how it impacts your body.
It's what our great grandmothers knew.
Yeah.
That you got to eat good food.
Yeah.
And that it'll make clear that there are many versions of good foods. Our ancestors, if you go back far enough, we all emigrated out of equatorial Africa into a wide variety of ecosystems around the world.
Yeah.
So humans, we've had reproductive success in the Arctic, in the subarctic, in the temperate zones, in the subtropics and the tropics, in forests and deserts, in grasslands, eating a wide variety of foods in each ecosystem. There's one diet that we know will wreck our health, and that's the westernized diet that has a lot of added sugars, a lot of processed white flours, that has a lot of emulsifiers and additives and food-like compounds. Yeah. That diet is delicious, it's cheap, it's affordable, it's addicting, and it's wrecking our health.
No, that's right. And am I right in thinking as well that there's quite a sort of turning point in that change of diet? Was it during / after the Second World War, when we were so much more dependent on grain and things like that? It was easy to grow. We could do a lot with it.
So we can sort of think, for millions of years, we ate some meat, leaves, tubers, berries, a lot of dirt.
Yep.
And then, 10,000 years ago, we cultivated grain, legumes, and dairy. Yep. 300 years ago, we learned how to make white flour and white sugar. World War II, we learned how to process our food and have shelf-stable food to conduct World War II.
Yeah.
And at the end of World War II, the processed food industry was born, and we steadily began to outsource our cooking. We eat more restaurant meals. We eat more meals from boxes, jars, and cans that we just warm up. Mm-hmm. And we don't make much food from ingredients anymore.
No, we don't cook as many meals, rather make a lot of meals. Construct a lot of meals.
We warm up food that someone else made from a box or a jar or a can, or we go out to a restaurant. Not many of us know how to shop, meal plan, and to make a food using a recipe that calls for vegetables, poultry, fish, meat, some spices. People don't know how to do that.
No.
It's shocking.
Yeah, I suppose we eat more for convenience or a little treat now rather than fuel for the body. I need to, put the good things in so that I can do more tomorrow. It's more about it's tea time. It's I need to make some food. I'll shove something in and then it's done. It's not looking at what's going in.
And we've been conditioned with here. Many folks use Saturday morning cartoons as marketing to convince children to eat all this candied cereal for breakfast and to get all these snack foods, treats, and really make the families' diets get worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, you become into that cycle then of craving those foods and that ease of obtaining them. I guess it's when you look at it from a different perspective, or you look back, it's quite obvious how it's come to be this way, and trying to break that mindset and go back to the basics is for a lot of people it just won't happen.
It is hard. It's always hard for any of us to create new habits and to break destructive habits, whether it's with how we spend our money, spend our time, exercise, or in this case, feed our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you more about your clinical research and the things that you've got going on at the moment. Yeah. But before I do, I know we've touched on it a little bit already, but I just wanted to ask you, because I've always wondered really, what was it like, I guess, to receive that MS diagnosis as a someone working in the medical field? Yeah. You're there, you've got into the industry to help people get better, to look after people. And here you are with a life-changing disease that is escalating at a rapid pace. What was that like?
When I first got the diagnosis, that was, I could go into my own medical record, look at the results before there were any barriers up to prevent people from doing that. And so I kept going back and rechecked the results multiple times, somehow wanting them to magically change, but of course they never did. And then I go to PubMed, and I start reading the basic science or, the papers about that, and I see that it's a progressive disease. And that, within 10 years, most people are not working.
Yeah.
It's very upsetting. I'm just getting more and more upset because I see how progressive this is. And that's when my wife sits me down and says, Terry, you have to stop reading. We'll find the very best MS center in the country. We'll go there, let them take care of you, but promise you you're going to stop reading because it's just getting you upset.
Yeah.
So I did. And then when I got in the wheelchair, I said, honey, we know how bad it's going to be. It's really bad. I'm going back to reading. Yeah. and so as it turned out, that worked out because then when I started reading and started experimenting, then I felt like, okay, at least I'm doing something.
Yeah. I think that's probably a big struggle for a lot of people, isn't it? Because when you get, if you receive that diagnosis, you don't feel like there's anything you can do because there's not, I think particularly whether it may be just in this country or not, I don't know. But in terms of debilitating, life-changing disease and illness, MS is one that even now there's not that much awareness of to the general public unless it affects your life already somehow, unless you know someone who has MS.
Correct. And we don't know. And what the physician will tell you is it's a progressive disease. You end up in a wheelchair. You got to take these drugs.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the three messages that you'll hear.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we're beginning to have more neurologists say, but there are things that you can be doing and you need to do them. When I was diagnosed, it's progressive, take the drugs, you'll end up in a wheelchair if you don't.
Yeah.
And then the drugs slow the time to wheelchair. Yeah. And they slow the time by 5 years. Well, that's still worth a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's definitely worth a lot.
Yeah.
But we need to tell people that drugs are not enough.
Yeah. And we're not saying don't take the drugs. We're not saying drugs aren't helpful. They're just not the be all and end all. There's things you have to do alongside every day that you can do and take control and give you that sense of control. Right.
I mean, I think we all have to evaluate the risk of disability progression versus the risk from the drugs. And the drugs that I took, I took very potent drugs that when you look at the package insert, it was 2% risk of acute leukemia each time you took them. And I don't remember what the risk was for damage to your heart and heart failure each time you took them. But I was willing to take them because I could still use my hands, I could still feed myself, I could still wipe my own butt, and that was really very useful to me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I was more afraid of worsening disability than of the side effects of the drugs. That's a deeply personal decision that we all have to make. What I hope everyone who's listening can realize is vegetables are pretty safe. Protein is pretty safe. Healthy fats like olive oil, fish oil, that's pretty safe. Meditation, that's safe.
Yep.
Exercise, you have to, be careful, get someone, hopefully you'll ask for a physical therapy referral so they can help you design an exercise program to address your weaknesses. And help you do things that you enjoy. All of those things I think are safe. Yeah. And you can ask your specialist or your primary care to a referral to help you with your diet, for occupational therapy, for referral to help you with a stress management program. Because if your neurologist won't, your primary care should.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you've touched on something there which has been a topic that I've tend to have kind of ended up in a discussion with most of the people that I've spoke with already, and that is around stress. Because from the conversations I've had, and particularly in my own sort of story, I really feel that it was at an incredibly stressful time in my life where I noticed all these symptoms start to flare up and start to become noticeable to me. So what is your view then of stress and how it affects multiple sclerosis, whether it be the revealing of symptoms that are underlying or perhaps a cause of multiple sclerosis in the first place?
In my clinical research, and in my clinical practice and in my own personal life, what I see is in the 24 months prior to diagnosis, there's usually severe stress, whether it is a psychological stress at work, at home. It might be a severe physical stress with an accident or a major surgery that happened, but there's severe physical or psychological stress that accelerates the autoimmune process that leads to worsening symptoms that lead to the diagnosis.
Right.
We also know that people with MS and other neuroimmune conditions, we have a much higher rate of early life stress, that is adverse childhood experiences, than people who don't have MS or neuroimmune conditions.
Right.
And, I can look at my own life. When I was 9, my sister died. And that was very difficult for my family. Yeah. And, my family never fully recovered from the pain of that loss. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I was doing clinical research and I saw this extraordinary level of early life stress in all of my participants that I thought back and realized, well, I too had severe early life stress.
Yeah.
And so now I talk about this with my patients, and I also talk about what was the severe psychological or physical stress that you might have had in the prior 24 months. Wow. And I've yet to meet someone who says they didn't have any.
Yeah, no, I was skipping along the beach for 2 years, and then all of a sudden, no, there's always something, isn't there? And I guess that goes to show, I think, the way that our bodies deal with stress, particularly if we don't deal with it, if we're not the type to be open and discuss our stresses, our worries, our concerns. I think particularly in men, we see that sort of stiff upper lip. We don't want to talk about our feelings. We'll keep it to ourselves. The body has to do something with it, and therefore, pushes it down, buries it away, and your immune system goes, well, I have to do something with this. And that's when, problems can occur. So
our cortisol levels go up, or the time of cortisol is disrupted. It can disrupt our sleep. It will overly activate the microglia, that is the immune cells in the brain, and that will lead to problems with our ability to repair the myelin. Because our bodies and our brains have wear and tear as part of living, which we should be able to repair. If our microglia, that is our immune cells, are shifted over into that reactive state, they can't do the repairs. Yeah. And when you can't do the repairs, that's when we're going to have those relapses. That's when we're going to have those enhancing lesions. That's when we're going to become symptomatic.
Yeah. That's why I think it always circles back, doesn't it, to our body has to do so many weird and wonderful things. We have to create a hospitable canvas for it, I guess, to be able to do the things it needs to do. And the only way we can do that is through our diet. I read a study recently, I've seen that there's been some sort of research into the effect of the damaged myelin as opposed, the reaction to you having damaged myelin versus the fact that you have damaged myelin staying in the system. Is that something you've read much on at the moment?
So if you have damaged myelin, that inhibits the repair. You have to get the damaged myelin out of the way. And so there are a number of signals that we call inhibitory signals. And we know that you have more of these inhibitory signals if you have severe mental health issues, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and multiple sclerosis. Okay. When we damage our myelin, our immune cells, the microglia, have to come in and they organize the wrecking crew that will come in and eat up the debris. Yeah. And you got to get all the debris eaten up. You have to have a clean bed on which to begin the repair process. Yeah. And so the microglia have to be able to supervise the wrecking crew before they can call in the rebuilding crew. Yeah. And we know that for whatever reason, we get stuck in the wrecking crew phase for the MS, and we don't get a good job of calling in the general contractor to come and do the repair work. Yeah.
So it's like an analogy, I guess, as well, of if you were to have a filling or a crown at the dentist, the dentist is going to drill out all the
junk,
the decay and the rubbish, the crap, get rid of that before they cover that up and protect it. And there's no reason to cover it up if all the bad things are still inside.
Right. And if you do cover it up with the bad things inside, you're going to get an abscess and you'll have a much worse problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's great to see that there's, you touched on the fact that when you were diagnosed, there wasn't as much understanding or as much understanding. There weren't as many drugs available on the market at the time. We're seeing more and more sort of advancements in treatment and understanding of MS, and you are now conducting some more clinical research and trials yourself. So do you want to just tell us a little bit more about what they are and how they're going?
So we're to our 8th clinical trial. Right now we're comparing a ketogenic diet to a paleo diet to a usual diet. People will come to Iowa at month 0, month 3, and month 24. We'll get measures of walking, hand, vision, thinking, measures of fatigue, quality of life. And we're doing a research MRI, so no contrast, but we'll get that at baseline and at the end of the study, month 24. And that will let us see what's happening to brain volume and spinal cord volume. It's my hypothesis. What I'm testing is, by teaching people how to improve their diet, can we get them back to healthy rates of brain volume loss? Because, Liam, and this should worry all of us who have MS, as a group, our brain is shrinking 1% per year, which is why we have higher rates of frailty and nursing home care and dementia. Wow. In my clinical practice, what I see is anxiety goes away, depression goes away, brain fog goes away. So I am very hopeful that people in the intervention groups will get to healthy rates of brain aging. And because we are giving tips on how to improve your diet to my control arm, and I expect most of them to actually improve their diets as well, I think the control arm is going to improve their diet. And probably have better brain volume. Yeah. And what I want people to know is the drugs do a great job of turning off relapses and reducing the number of enhancing lesions. They don't do very good with anxiety, depression, or brain fog, or brain volume loss. They haven't solved that problem. I think to solve that problem, you got to fix your diet. Yeah. And that's what we're going to be addressing. That's
amazing. How do sort of diet studies differ to a typical drug study?
Yeah. So if I'm in a drug study, neither the participant nor the investigators know in group A or group B who has the active ingredient, who has the placebo. In a diet study, the people know what they're eating. So they know they're in intervention arm or they're in the usual diet arm, right. Which means and I have to spend a lot of time with all of my participants to let them know that we're all in a sacred mission. The intervention arm is a sacred mission. They're going to be changing their diet. The control arm, they're in a sacred mission because they're the comparison group. And yes, I understand the control group. They're disappointed to be in the control group. Yeah. We have to give them a lot of love because what they're doing is really vital as well. Yeah. In the intervention arm, we're asking them to eat new foods, new recipes, new ingredients, new shopping patterns. Sometimes they have to learn how to cook. They've never cooked before. They've never shopped. They haven't meal planned before. So there's a lot of stuff they have to learn. And we're letting them know that if the whole family eats the same way, it will be easier, because you want the person eating, their eating environment to be supportive. If I'm asking them to eat these new foods, but the old tempting foods are still there in front of them, you're asking a lot for them to not eat that delicious food that's so terrible for them, that tastes so delicious.
Yeah. And they've potentially over a period of time become quite used to having they crave, they're addictive. I know we warn them, but when you give up these addictive foods, the first 2 weeks, you'll probably have headaches, some body aches, and that generally diminishes over the first week, is generally gone by the end of the second week. But we warn people about that. That's a thing, and it's a real thing. Yeah. And like you said, it's like the greater good, isn't it? You're doing something for science and for your fellow MS warriors to try and understand more about this. Yeah.
Correct.
Do you find that obviously it's hard that in some drug tests you would have like a placebo, wouldn't you? Like you said.
Yes.
When you're eating food and you're told what to eat, you know which group you are or which you're not. So with MS studies, particularly with diet, it is different to other sorts of studies. Have you ever found that there's almost like a conflict of interest from your own perspective?
So everyone's worried that, oh my God, I can't do these studies fairly because I've created the Wahls diet. So we have a lot of safeguards in place. The university has a conflict of interest. I don't do the consenting. I don't have contact with people teaching them the diet. I don't have any contact with the data. We have a statistician who's going to analyze the data, who doesn't know group assignments. So he will get the data, group 1, 2, and 3. He'll do all the analyses. He will write a report to the Data Safety Monitoring Board and to the University of Iowa Conflict of Interest Committee, saying, this is what we found. Yeah. And he'll be on all of our manuscripts. So in fact, this is as rigorous as you can be with any clinical trial. And I would make the same observation that when we design new drugs, that investigator is doing the first clinical trials. And so the universities that are part of those studies, we all have conflict of interest committees that make sure that we use these kinds of processes. So you have an independent statistician doing the analysis to say, yes, everything was done correctly, and these are the findings.
Yeah. So even though it's a dietary study rather than a drug study or trial, it's still following that same rigorous process that you'd have to for any drug to be approved. It's still going through from a science perspective in terms of a fair experiment, isn't it? That's a very fair experiment. Don't mean anything unless it's not a fair experiment. Yeah.
And because we are trying to help the control diet improve their diet, I may see that all three groups are improving. So we do have a contingency plan in terms of historical controls from drug trials that had MRI studies to know what happens if you don't take drugs, placebo arm, and usual care, what happens to brain volume. So we'll be able to have that as another control.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic! It's really exciting to see how it goes. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how the study continues, and I'm sure you'll be sharing a lot of that on your social media platforms as well, which I'll be linking.
I'll be letting everyone know who's had me on podcasts before to bring me back so we can talk about that. And I should also make clear that when you screen for our study, we ask you if you want to be in our patient database, because we do survey-based only trials as well. And these are studies that people could participate in from anywhere in the world. So we're trying to grow that database to over 10,000 people.
Amazing.
Getting close.
This is something that people listening to this podcast or who are following on social media can get involved with. You've kindly sent a link over. So that's something that I'll be able to share. So if there is anyone who's interested and wants to find out more and potentially get involved with the study, whether it's, flying to Iowa or just sending an email or, doing it remotely, it is possible.
There are things that we do that can be done remotely. For this trial, you're going to have to come to Iowa. And you can learn more about the study at terrywahls.com/MS study. But even if you don't want to come to Iowa, I encourage you to complete the screening so you can be part of our database for other survey-based studies that we'll do.
Yeah. So yeah, even if you're not a part of it, the data is so valuable that, as much as we can get hold of is, imperative. That's incredible. And like I said, to see the correlation between a dietary study and a drug study, I think is great and so wanted that there isn't just a focus on drugs, but touching on drugs, do you think there will ever be something, whether it be a food group or a drug that comes to market that can perhaps look to repair myelin, that's been damaged?
So, we have a bunch of drugs that work really well in mice and in rodents. And then when they try them in people, either a very tiny effect or no effect at all.
Okay.
And I think the reason for that is when you do these mouse and rat experiments, we control the diet very carefully, we control light very carefully, we control exercise very carefully. When we do these studies in people, we get to eat what we want. We get to have fights with our spouses or at work. We exercise or not. We go out we drink a lot of alcohol or not. We smoke or not. And so there are too many other variables.
Yeah.
Well, we are writing proposals. There's another proposal that we're sending back. And let me describe it. This is a stopping study where people on disease-modifying drugs after the age of 50, 55, you don't have many more relapses. So could you just stop the drugs safely or not? And there are some studies going on trying to answer that question. None of those studies have controlled for diet or exercise or stress reduction or tobacco use. We're writing, we didn't get funded last time. We're trying again. We're writing a stopping study where we put everyone on a paleo diet, give them an exercise program for 3 months, get them all good on their diet and exercise. And then we'll randomize. So half stay on the drug, half go off. And we follow them for 18 months. And we see how it goes. And what I predict is, if we get you eating well, exercising well, we can safely take you off your drugs over the age of 55. Now, we'll see if I can get the NIH to fund me this time around. So we'll keep trying. And I'm hopeful that we will ultimately get funded for that study.
I really hope we do as well, and good luck with it. I think, like I said, it's really important work, and just goes to show that, diet as well is something that sits alongside all these other studies. It can help almost every aspect of the disease, whether it be drugs or not, or coming off drugs or never having had them in the first place.
The food we eat will either accelerate our disease or accelerate our healing.
Yeah.
Depending on the choices we make.
No, and it goes back to what we said at the start as well. Being able to do something now, if you are suffering, if you feel that your disease is progressing or worsening, there are things that you can be doing, regardless of whether you're partway through or finished a study. Changing your diet and eating better is going to be a good thing. So
it's going to be helpful. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, brilliant. There's a couple of questions that I've been asking the guests that I've been speaking with. And they've had some really great answers. I was wondering if I could ask them to you as well. They're very similar questions, but from a slightly different take. The first one would be, what would you say to yourself if you could go back in time to the moment or the time period where you were first diagnosed? What would you say to
that person
years ago? Yeah.
Keep reading and experiment on yourself. Pay attention to what's making you feel better and what made you feel worse.
Amazing. Absolutely right. I love that it's almost that the vision, I guess, of you experimenting on your cells. I've got all these sort of images in my head of a big lab in your basement and some sort of nutty professor type scenario.
Yeah, my kids call me the nutty professor. Yes, absolutely.
Amazing. Great. And lastly, again, a very similar question, but from a different perspective, what advice would you give to someone who's listening right now who has just been diagnosed? So someone who's just received that horrible diagnosis, they don't know any of the work you've done, you don't know any of the drugs available. What would be your advice there?
Well, a couple of things. Pick up my book, The Wahls Protocol, because it will inspire hope that there's a lot that you can do. It's not just food. There are many things from which you can choose. And then follow me on Instagram at Dr. Terry Wahls, because you get to see what I'm eating and doing. And I think you'll laugh. Plus, it's just really lots and lots of fun.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Like I said, I think that just reiterates, doesn't it, that whilst you might not feel it at the time, there is a lot of support and inspiration available. And whilst we can bury our heads and feel really sort of consumed by a diagnosis, there is hope out there. And there are things that we can be doing to sort of help ourselves live a better life with multiple sclerosis.
We can have a great life. Absolutely. You can have a great life. You can be a mom. You can be a dad. You can keep working. You can play with your children and your grandchildren. Yeah.
You can get on
the future. The future is bright.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I think that's a great message to end on as well. What I will do is I will leave links in the description and any of the posts to your website, your social media, as well as information about the trials that you're conducting at the moment, should anybody want to get involved. But just want to thank you again for not only joining me on the podcast, but for all the work you're doing, because there's a huge army of people behind you that are supporting you and wishing you well. So thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing, Dr. Wahls.
Much love to you and your family as well.
Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode of the MS Mindset, don't forget to hit the like button and hit subscribe. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode.